none, we'll move on to agenda item number 2. Is to approve the consent agenda, approve the minutes, and ratify the payment of bills. Is there anything in there that the commissioners need to pull out?
I'll make the motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Motion by Bob, second by Monty. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Agenda item number 3 is to approve the financial statements.
I don't have a whole lot, but I thought I'd mention that if you look at the electric, the customer revenue was up about 187,000, but then if you look at my last note, the PCA brought in 187,000, whereas last year was 0, so pretty much dead even if you take that into account. If you look at the gas, it's almost kind of the same, only about 2/3 of the total net income increase was due to the fuel cost adjustment, where we were given credits before of 73,000 the year before, and now we were charging 10,000. So that's the biggest difference from month to month. And then the only other thing I wanted to mention was you'll see a big variance in the electric operating expenses, about 100,000. That's because last year we paid CIP to 3M for about 80,000. That's all I have.
I just had a few things, and we've touched on this in the past couple months, but market sales, we had a good month of market sales again. For July, obviously it was hot, so we brought in just under 229,000 in market sales. So year to date, we're just over 800,000 in market sales. And our budget was 429,000, so we're double what our budget was. And so this year, obviously, with May being warm, June being extremely warm, and July, we've been running our generation a lot. So I've been making really good margins on those sales that we're pushing into the MISO market. For the month of July, we averaged just over $64 per megawatt hour for market pricing, and we generated our cost of generation was about $32. So we made about $100% margin on that. So we've had some really good couple of months here. So shouldn't be any surprise by the end of the year. We'll be well above our market, or above our budget of $3.3 million. We'll probably be in that close to that 3.8 to 3.9 million by the time it's all said and done. So, whereas the last couple of years we've been under market sales because it's been cooler. This year it's flipped and it's been extremely well. And of course we're obviously doing some of our hedging program as well. So some of the generation that's going on, it has the last couple of months we've been using it to keep our generating costs low related to what our retail power supply is, so that we're buying some portion off the market, we're selling some into the market, but then we're also generating locally here and hedging against the market. So all three of those kind of pronged approaches that we've been typically using in our business model have been working really well this year on the electric side. So things have been going good there. As Jared mentioned, some of those other things are trending fairly well. Both July was good for the natural gas side and the electric side. Year to date, even though our financials don't quite show year to date relative to last year that we're doing well, we're actually, had we not used 1.2 million in reserves in February for the polar vortex, we'd actually be well above year to date through 2020. So although we had the polar vortex and spent those reserves, we're still sitting really well in both divisions here through July, so that's a good thing. The other piece, as Jared talked about, just on the fuel cost side, just to keep it in front of you guys on the balance sheet, again, we're moving our rate stabilization fund in the natural gas side back up to that $600,000 threshold. So if you look at the balance sheet through this month, we're at $388,000. We got about just over a little over $200,000 left to add back into the rate stabilization fund. So we're trending on schedule with where we should be by the end of the year. So we'll continually see small little charges on that side to get that rate stabilization fund back up. So just keep that in the back of your mind. The reason I point that out is I know the board has talked about increasing the rate stabilization fund to a new threshold. And we'll have that as part of kind of the budgeting process and strategic planning process, so that we have maybe a little bit more cash reserve cushion there for, another polar vortex that happens in the future. So just wanted to let you know that we're trending as we should be on that side to get that back to where we need to. So any questions on any of the financials? Otherwise, usage is up and things are looking pretty good. So
I have a question, not necessarily on the financials, but something you brought up with all the generation going on in the last few months, how the generators run.
Pretty good. I mean, we've had a few little things. Unit 1's been running really well. That's been running well. Our Unit 5 Wartsilla, that's running well. We're not getting the full megawatts out of it. We're running about 8 megawatts in that ballpark, and it really should be around 9, so we're losing a little bit of megawatts there. So we're troubleshooting some of that. We've got some calls in to try to come out and figure out what's going on with that. Unit 6 and 7 is running, but obviously we've got some major overhauls that need to be done in October with the oil mist issue that we
Okay, that
have.
was my next question.
But they have been running fairly well, right, Dan? I mean, Unit 6 and 7 for the most part. So
But that's October, the overall?
that's when we're gonna do the overhauls when they're scheduled to come out, so. But we used all 3 of them, fairly consistently for the month of July, month of June, they've all been running. So we got little tweaks here that we need to get the full output out of them, but, we'll keep working through those. But Unit 1, we've been running that one quite a bit with the heat, and so things have been going good there, so.
Awesome.
How have the past due accounts trended?
Much better, actually. Second month of disconnects was last week, so collected quite a bit the last couple of months. People can make payment plans, so obviously we haven't caught totally up, but on the right trail.
Yeah, a lot of people have been going to the UCAP agencies, so they've been paying, $1,400 arrears bills, $2,000 arrear bills, $700 arrear bills. So as long as people meet the qualifications and they can show that they're behind on their utility bills, most of those agencies, at least here in our area, have been paying most of those in full, no matter what size the arrearage is. So that's been pretty good.
So a lot of it was stuff they qualified for the whole time. We tried getting a hold of them, and just until you make them go in, they just put it off. So it's good to get that started.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions?
I said one thought, and it's less about this month, but more of what for commissioners to keep in mind as we go into budgeting. But towards the end of the year, let's have a conversation about what we feel an appropriate level of cash is within the organization. And if you look at some of the cash designations reported on the combined gas and electric, you can see the historical trending of our cash position. I'd just ask you to look at that and see what you guys think.
Any other questions? For a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
I'll second.
Motion by Anthony, second by Don. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Open forum, nobody's here. Communication. Matt, do you have anything for us today?
Not a whole lot. Council does have a new council member, so they appointed Pat May to fill Brandon Begnon's position when he left and moved out of town. So I think Mark's maybe talked with Pat about having him connect with.
I already met with him last Friday.
Good. So if you run into him, you can congratulate him on at least that interim position. The special election will be in February. There's 2 candidates. And then, that's about it. Oh, the other thing too, council approved a conditional use permit last night for MITGI to go into the old Shopko building. So I anticipate they'll slowly start moving into that over the next couple of months. So that's it.
Good. All right. Thank you. Divisions? Dan?
Panels were delivered this week and they're installing them on the solar project, so that's moving along faster than expected, so doing pretty well on that. I'm just keeping up with reconductor projects and the developments. More than that.
Human
I was
resources.
just going to talk about the disconnects, which I just did. So.
Beat him to the punch.
When's your new accountant start?
Oh, let's give a 3rd week this week.
3rd week.
Not quite fast enough for your taste,
Yeah,
but
don't minimal training, so it's the same software.
good.
Human resources. Brenda?
There's nothing new.
Legal. Mark? Anything?
Nothing today.
Thank you. General Manager. Jeremy?
Just some high-level things, just keep things on your radar here as we're moving into the kind of the last quarter of the year. Obviously, we got strategic planning coming up. I did send some communication out. I think I've gotten some feedback already from a few of you what days may work and what things may not work for September, October. I think either one of those months, if we have a strategic planning meeting, I think that fits in well with our budgeting CIP. If we want to change financial reserve policies, all those types of things. So take a look at your guys' schedule and let us know, Angie or I, what works for you guys, what doesn't. We'll try to shore up here some dates and get that on your calendar out in the future so that we can plan around that stuff. We'll be getting in, obviously, into the CIP and the budget stuff and some of the fleet conversations. I know managers have met on sort of talking about some of the fleet and how we may adjust things and how do we take into consideration electric vehicles moving forward and reducing some of our carbon footprint with some of our vehicles that are light duty that we can take some opportunities to take advantage of. Like I mentioned, I met with Pat May last week, the new council member. A good conversation, kind of brought him up to speed on what's going on with Hutchinson Utilities and some of the uniqueness that we bring to the table that maybe some municipal utilities don't have. And so he was very engaging. Sent him some literature, and he said he would read a lot of that stuff. I know I talked with Mark, and it seems like he reads a lot of the stuff and is willing to educate himself. So he understood definitely the commodities market and some of those things going on. So it was a good conversation, but got him up to speed where we needed to. Been working a little bit off and on here with the production staff. Obviously, Randy, with his retirement, working with some of the crew chiefs, and we've been working through just some different operational issues and some operating things in that department. We've kind of get together, and we have our recertification process with the League of Minnesota Cities to get our insurance reduced rates, and so we were working through that over the last couple of weeks, getting them the proper documentation, the things that the league needs to see in order for us to qualify for those reduced insurance rates. So we've been working on a lot of that stuff. Obviously, the production manager position, we've posted that, and we'll start moving that piece forward, trying to get that position filled in the next couple of months. Hopefully, if things go smooth, we can try to turn that over as fast as possible. In the meantime, the two crew chiefs, are taking over a lot of Randy's responsibility, and then I'm taking over a portion of that and trying to coordinate, making sure that we're not having things fall through the crack, whether it's emissions reporting, whether certain deadlines as far as things on our units, and working with the EPA, the MPCA, and some of those regulatory bodies. So we've got a pretty good handle on that stuff moving forward. But that'll take a little bit of time here moving forward until we get a new person in that position. Customer survey, we'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later with the compensation plan. That's moving forward, and Angie's kind of been leading the charge on that piece. We've gotten back 17 responses on that salary and benefits data from the municipal sector, and there's still some to come in yet. If you guys recall, we had 22 the last time we went through, so we're hoping we get more than that on the municipal side, and then Baker Tilly is working on the private sector data, and so they'll start compiling that information and start putting that information together. And I'm anticipating having a report sometime by October once I get that information. So that's moving along. Still, I think that's it for now. And just obviously tracking some of the stuff that's going on at the federal level with some of the stimulus bills, which I gave you guys an update on what's going on there. And so one of the things obviously that we got to just keep monitoring is how they're going to send out some of that funding. Is it going to be through block grants? Is it going to be pass-throughs to the state, to local jurisdictions? Is it going to be direct federal dollars? And then obviously what we need to do is look at, are there particular projects or particular things moving into the future that we can qualify for, where maybe we can tap into some of those dollars. So we'll watch some of those requirements and some restrictions and things that come out as this information becomes more available, to see if there's some opportunity we can take advantage of for some of those federal dollars. So that's kind of what's going on, at least in the short terms.
All right, thank you, Jeremy. Agenda item number 6, policies. A lot of policies to review. Looks like there's a couple to approve changes to. Explanation of billing procedure and the Minnesota cold weather rule.
Yeah, so the two policies in front of you, the explanation of the billing procedure is essentially just making sure that it's mirroring up with what this new state statute is in regards to the cold weather rule, because a portion of the explanation of the billing procedures talks about disconnections, and so we got to make sure we're consistent in our policies. And so in the first policy, you'll see what the the legislature has approved moving forward is essentially giving the customer more time to, before they can be shut off. And so our old policy used to be that we would give them 20 days, which was the state statute, prior to the legislature approving amended changes this year. Obviously now, with the changes that have been enacted in June and July through this legislative session, they're now requiring utilities to provide customers at least 30 days of notice once the bill goes out of a disconnection for them to come in, make their payments, seek energy assistance help, or in our case, get on a budget plan so that they're not getting disconnected. So the first policy is basically just adjusting the 20 days to 30 days after a mail-in notice. And then the second policy, which is just basically the Minnesota state statute, all the changes in there that I'm recommending for you guys to approve is essentially what's been changed in the state statute. So as you probably read through some of this stuff, really in essence what they're doing is they're expanding the cold weather rule another 2 weeks in the front end and 2 weeks in the back end that utilities have to abide by. So instead of the cold weather rule now going from October 15th to April 15th, it's now going from October 1st to April 30th. So 15 days in the back and 15 days in the front end of the calendar. In addition to that, like the first policy, it's requiring us to give people 30 days notice after we send out the mailing. And then have added in when we have to start sending out statements of explaining what the cold weather rule is and what people's rights and responsibilities are. They've added that information in. So our staff obviously understands when those things need to happen and move out. And then the rest of the language is this stuff that's either been amended or tweaked or changed. Some of it has to do with the state recognizing that a lot of utilities are using AMI systems now. And so they've put verbiage in there talking about if you're using an AMI system to do disconnections or using it for other purposes, that they're recognizing that that's a viable option as far as the disconnection process in the cold weather rule. But overall, they're providing a little bit more sense of customer preference when it comes to the cold weather rule. So not any real major, as Jared and I have talked about with the staff, there is no real major impact to how we normally do our processing, normally how we put out our notifications. The only thing that is a little problematic, and we'll just have to backdate it, is that 30-day notice. Instead of giving people 20 days, now it's extended 10 more days, so we just have to make sure that we're coordinating that appropriate with our billing cycle and then our due dates on our utility bills. But outside of that, extending the cold weather rule and some of those new provisions in there aren't going to be real problematic for us. So.
All right. Any other questions?
I'll make a motion to approve the changes.
I'll second it.
Motion by Don, second by Bob. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion is approved. Agenda item number 7, unfinished business. There's nothing there. Number 8, new business. Discussion of the customer survey.
So hopefully you guys have had a chance at least to look through a little bit of this stuff. Obviously, I got the sense from the last meeting, we wanted to move forward in the residential survey, so I did go with Q Market Research. It's the local survey provider in the state. And you guys are aware that they provide that same service to a lot of our peers, so they know what they're doing. So I've provided you just a general template that they gave us this, as a way of saying, okay, here's a draft of what one could look like. I've talked with the management staff. They provided some feedback. Certainly I want to get feedback from you guys. When you look at the survey, is there particular questions that come up in your mind or particular things you would like to see on the survey that you're interested about? A couple of things that we've talked about at the staff meeting, we have to address, one of the questions was, do we put something in there about ease of paying your bills? Is that something we want specifically, and how easy is it, even though there's options? Do people feel that they've got all the options they need, or is there something else that we should look at? We'll put something in there regarding electric vehicles, moving forward, how many people are thinking about having an electric vehicle in the future, because that will maybe help us drive what we do with infrastructure moving forward and how fast we roll things out. And then solar garden was the one that we've talked about in the past. Do people want to see some type of solar garden program in place? So those things I could add in as things that are unique to Hutchinson, utilities and what we're after for strategic planning purposes.
What kind of questions are you thinking on the solar side? Could you take a step back and start with renewables and then narrow it down to something else besides solar? I mean, because
Yeah, I
we
think
think
you
it
could.
should be solar, and we're probably right that it should be solar. I'm guessing that's what we'll find out, but do you want to ask for something more on renewables than before you go into solar?
Yeah, I think at this point I haven't really thought too much about how to craft the questions, but more of the broad topics. I think we do, obviously, with renewables. Right now we're 100% carbon neutral in the community, and some of our bigger customers are going 100% renewable. So we're already kind of moving down that trajectory. The solar garden piece was probably more of a local presence for residential customers specifically, but that could take a couple different shapes in my mind.
The couple things that come to mind when I think about the local projects would be, would they prefer to buy a subscription or whatever the correct term would be in a centralized solar garden, or would they rather have something on their property, a homestead or whatever, and that could give us some direction how we should think about it. Dave, you're more active probably than the rest of us in talking with people about the solar stuff. Do you have an opinion based on conversations you've had with people, or have you not asked them about the concept of a subscription in a larger garden?
Well, when I do get the phone calls on it, they're doing it to reduce their energy and reduce costs. So it'd be different than the subscription base. So it's definitely two different ways of thinking. So at this point, it's more about installing it on their home or business to offset energy costs. It's more of what I've been hearing. I haven't had a call on maybe one or two, very few on if there's offer some sort of solar subscription. But then when that comes with a cost, then that goes away pretty quick because now it's an adder. So it's two different ways of looking at it. Now, but we can reconstructure a subscription-based anywhere we'd like to as well. So.
So those are just some general topics. At this point, we're just hoping for some specific feedback from you guys on, are there particular things that are burning issues for you, or burning things you'd like to hear from the customers about?
The things that stuck out to me, which I liked, was the efficiency and friendliness of staff. I think we already know the answer, but that's a really good question. Cost per value, perceived cost value, reliability, and that kind of stuff. That was kind of what I was hoping to see. It's good.
Yeah, we've pinned ourselves on the reliability for a really long time, decades, so I think we think we're doing a nice job with it. The ratings say that we are, but what does the customer think? I think that's a good question, Monty.
And the way when I talked with Rick about this, the way we really want to structure this is twofold. One, I think the example he gives us in the box are the repeatable questions that we're going to ask every time we do the survey, so that we have a bench line or a benchmark and a trend line for those types of questions. Outside of whatever those questions that we feel, these are the ones that we want to ask repeatedly. If we want to do it every couple of years, some of these utilities do these things quarterly. That's one section. And then the other section are some of the ones like what he highlighted in yellow as an example, that those things could change over time based on where the commission wants to go with strategic initiatives, what's going on in the industry at certain times over the next 10 years or whatever. So try to think of it in that regard. I do like the examples of the box ones. I think those are good questions that are baseline questions that we want to ask, making sure that we people feel they're getting good value for their service here, that it's priced competitively, that it's reliable, that we've got good customer service, whether it's customer service in the front for our billing or just customer service out in the field. I think those are all great measurements of how people perceive us. And then it's really what other types of questions specifically we want to ask, I think is where we're kind of at. So
You touched on 3 or 4 of them when you started talking about it. It was solar or renewables, so we're going to think about that concept. And it was EVs. There was one other one that you'd mentioned that I liked. Those would be good to know the ratepayers' opinions on. We probably won't have it for this fall strategic planning, I would guess, but we could move ahead with our planning and revisit after getting ratepayer feedback from the survey.
Thoughts?
I don't have anything to add.
Anything from the city side?
I was gonna say the benchmarking is really nice.
Okay.
Like we do, I think we've got 4 or 5 surveys now with our national survey and that benchmarking becomes really useful for that, specific question-wise. I think some of what Jennifer brought up were questions that we get, asked at the city, so I think those are fair questions.
Do you guys like the general format of this kind of draft? When you look at it, 1, 2 pages.
It looks simple.
Looks like something I wouldn't throw away.
Right. It's easy, maybe 10 minutes to complete it. Or if you have a little more thought process and something open-ended, you can add stuff.
Is it, what's the methods that they can complete it? Online, paper?
Yeah, so with these guys, they do 500 email and 500 mail. So we've already provided them a database of 500 of each. And so that's how they do it. Some do it by phone calls. The guys that we are using here just never got a good participation with the phone calls. People want something quick, emails, mail. We can put it on our website. They can go in and go to the website and do the survey if they want as well too. So that's how they're going to do the residential survey. And a good sampling of that, he said of the 1,000 that we send out, so the 500 emails and the 500 mails, a good sampling statistically is getting back around 200, 175 to 200 responses is an appropriate percentage for sampling. That gives you a good cross-section statistically. So that's what we're shooting for. And then if through the first 500 emails and 500 mails we don't get to that 175, 200, then they'll do some follow-ups and do some calls and keep putting stuff out until we get that sampling. On the commercial side, which is the other topic, is they actually do phone calls. They have better response with the business sector, giving them a personal phone call. It also allows them to engage the customer better and to ask follow-up questions. It allows just more communication back and forth with the commercial sector, which is obviously they have different interests in mind when it comes to their business and their utilities and so on. And they say typically in the 15, good sampling of the number of people that we have, commercial business here, the numbers that we have, anywhere from 15 to 20 is a good sampling of cross-section of businesses that we would call to do that. So they would do personal phone calls for the commercial sector.
How many commercial customers do we have? If we get responses from 20, do we have 100 customers or 500?
Yeah, we're over that. I'd say we're over that, a couple hundred for sure, 300-400 commercial customers. I know there was some interest in doing the commercial side, the business side as well, so I did get a quote from those guys. We don't have to proceed along with the residential survey. We certainly can. I mean, if we looked at the timelines, they would kind of mirror somewhat simultaneously. But I just give you guys an option if we want to move forward with the commercial side too, and just get a cross-section of the commercial customers back and then the residential customers, so we have feedback from both kind of classes. So we can look at that stuff kind of in totality. We can certainly do that, but it's not we don't necessarily need to either. So I'm just looking for feedback from you guys if you want to kind of pursue the commercial side, the business sector as well, while we're doing the residential side.
Yeah, I think I'm more interested on the residential side, but getting them both done makes sense.
I think by the number of ratepayers that we have, the residential side is much heavier on the number of customers, but it's financially, it's heavier on the commercial side. So when we talked initially about the survey, Jeremy, I asked if that included the commercial, and it didn't. So I'd be interested in hearing both, actually.
To get back to that, we have 981 meters commercial on the electric and 580 gas. Obviously, some of those are the same business.
Yeah. Thank you, Drew. Consider both.
Move forward with both.
Yeah.
Sure.
We'll start working on some draft surveys, and then we'll ship it to you guys, and you guys can take a look, and we can tweak it for, neither of them will go out until they get final approval from us that we like what the draft survey looks like before it gets sent out. But they've got everything else ready to go, so I would say by mid-September, we'll be ready to send the survey out. So we just need to complete the survey.
Good.
and move forward, so. Okay. So if you have any other thoughts on questions, shoot me an email or let me know. Make sure we'll incorporate that stuff in the survey. That's all I got.
All right, agenda item 9 is to adjourn then. A motion to adjourn?
We'll move.
Second.
Motion by Don, second by Monty, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right.
Any opposed?